the economy first, if I can. You know, the president is someone who very successfully often redirects attention from one thing to another. Do you get the sense he'd like to be focused on almost anything right now besides the tariffs and the economy?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's a really interesting moment, John, right? Because, and weirdly, the deportation cases and the economy and the markets are linked, right? Because as we saw when the Salvadoran president was in the Oval Office, Stephen Miller and the president and Marco Rubio will lie and lie and lie about Supreme Court rulings, claiming that the Supreme Court ruled in their favor. They will lie about the fact that this Abrigo Garcia guy is clearly a terrorist, despite not providing any evidence to that fact at all. And look, when the president and Miller and Rubio lie, MAGA folks believe them. Some people are outraged. Other folks are confused. You know who you can't lie to? You cannot lie to the markets. And the markets are delivering a brutal verdict on the lie that this tariff program is going to reindustrialize America, the lie that it's not going to be inflationary. And so it's interesting. You know, there's two people right now, two institutions that Donald Trump cannot cow. The markets, which are delivering just a brutal verdict, and of course the courts, who you were just talking about, who are I think on the very verge of starting contempt hearings against an administration that has truly shown contempt for the rule of law.
And get to the course in just 1 second, and the idea of contempt, which you've talked about actually quite a bit over the last month. But first, you know, Jerome Powell said what he said about tariffs and fear of unemployment, and that people will feel the impact of those prices and take responsibility for it. What's your view on that?
Well, it's a scary moment, right? I mean, I started my political career in the ashes of the 2007-2008 financial meltdown, where the Federal Reserve was a big part of rescuing the economy, right? During the COVID pandemic, the Federal Reserve and the tools that they have was a big part of rescuing the economy. What you just heard the Fed chair, who doesn't have a political bone in his body by design and by job description, saying, I probably can't fix the combination of inflation and recession that, I don't know if he said likely, but he certainly said that it was a possibility. And when you have the Federal Reserve saying, I may not be able to fix that, you, of course, have precisely what you had today, which is a stomach-churning 700-point drop in the stock market.
Now, on the issue before Judge Boasberg, and who said he has probable cause to institute contempt hearings here, you were on this program a month ago discussing this case, and you were asked, do you think that the U.S. is on the brink of a constitutional crisis? You responded, I do. Now, that was a month ago. How about where we are today?
Yeah, you know, John, I get asked that question 5 times a day, and I try to fend it off because we have an obviously lawless president who daily shows utter disdain for the constitutional oath. By the way, even so, I had to sort of chuckle when the press secretary in that segment you just landed said that Chris Van Hollen and we all take an oath to serve our constituents. Man, talk about a Freudian error. I've taken that oath a whole bunch of times. It says nothing about constituents. It is an oath to support and defend the Constitution. And so, I mean, I thought that was an interesting Freudian slip, that the press secretary doesn't really know who we are taking and what we are taking an oath to. But look, you know, there's no magic button that we press when there is a constitutional crisis. So what I think is really important right now is you have 2 federal judges saying, you guys are in big trouble. The judge in Maryland on the Abrigo Garcia case, and of course Judge Boasberg, who are all that is standing between the moment we're in right now, where the administration is showing disdain for the rule of law, and what I would certainly define as an absolute constitutional crisis, that moment when the president says, as Andrew Jackson said back in 1834, the courts have made their ruling, now let them enforce it. That is the moment where, you know, you might as well just say we are no longer living in a system of checks and balances or democracy, frankly.
Quickly, I want to ask you about some breaking news. The New York Times just reported this, and I want to quote it here. Israel had planned to strike Iranian nuclear sites as soon as next month, but was waved off by President Trump in recent weeks in favor of negotiating a deal with Tehran to limit its nuclear program, according to administration officials and others briefed on the discussions. Also in the article, a National Security Council spokesperson told the Times, quote, President Trump has been clear Iran cannot have nuclear weapons and all options remain on the table. Now, I know you, as a ranking member of the Intelligence Committee, there are some things you can't tell me, but what is your reaction to this reporting?
Yeah, I'm not one bit surprised by it, John. You know, the Israelis, and in this prime minister in particular, Prime Minister Netanyahu, has floated this before with other presidents. Other presidents have stepped in and say, not a good idea. I have no doubt in my mind, and I spent about an hour and a half with the prime minister a month ago or so. I have very little doubt in my mind, but this prime minister has decided that he's going to attack Iran. He looks at Iran and sees a degraded air defenses. He sees a weakened country, and he sees his own legacy is wrapped up in this. His challenge, of course, is getting Donald Trump to sign up to assisting. And there's two big things that I think push back against that. One, I don't have a lot of good things to say about Donald Trump, but I do think he has a natural aversion to wars, and in particular wars in the Middle East. And oh, by the way, we've been talking about how disastrous the economy is and is likely to get. If you layer in a massive spike in global oil prices on top of these tariffs, on top of the market decline, I mean, I don't even know if the word recession is a big enough or an all-encompassing enough word to describe what would happen to the American economy if there was a shooting war in the Middle East right now.
Congressman Heim, do appreciate your time tonight on many subjects. Thank you very much. More now on today's development.